I seek leave to move the following motion. That this House notes that 1. The routine CPI indexation that took effect yesterday will increase job seeker payments by just 96 cents a day, and other income support payments, including disability support, pension and carer payment, by similarly nominal amounts. That 2. Indexation will lift the job seeker payment to just $55 a day, including the energy supplement, which equates to less than half the minimum wage full-time. That 3. This increase is insufficient to prevent the widespread distress evidenced by income support recipients due to inadequate payments alongside rising prices and rents. 4. The government's media release announcing these changes, titled "Indexation puts more in the pockets of millions of Australians," does not acknowledge that income support payments are not enough to cover the cost of essential goods and services, including housing, food and energy. And 2. Calls on the government to significantly increase income support payments beyond indexation in the upcoming May budget.
Is leave granted? I call the Minister.
Leave is not granted.
Give the call to the member for North Sydney.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I move that so much of the standing and cessation orders be suspended as would prevent me from moving the following. That this House 1 notes that the routine CPI indexation that took effect yesterday will increase job seeker payments by just 96 cents per day, and other income support payments, including disability support, pension and carer payment, by similarly nominal amounts. 2. Indexation will lift the job seeker payment to just $55 a day, including the energy supplement, which equates to less than half the minimum wage full-time. 3. The increase is insufficient to prevent the widespread distress experienced by income support recipients due to the inadequate payments alongside rising prices and rent. 4. The government's media release announcing these changes, titled "Indexation puts more in the pockets of millions of Australians," does not acknowledge that income support payments are not enough to cover the cost of essential goods and services, including housing, food and energy. And 2. Calls on the government to significantly increase income support payments beyond indexation in the upcoming May budget. Mr Deputy Speaker, with the latest data telling us that 1 in 8 Australians are currently living below the poverty line, it's time this parliament prioritised a debate about the woefully inadequate income support system that we now have in this country. The fact that most people relying on unemployment and parenting payments in Australia are being forced to choose which everyday essentials they will give up just to survive is something that should be of the highest concern to this parliament and this government. Ultimately, urgent action is required to increase income support payments so recipients can afford the basics and be lifted out of poverty, and the government has a very real opportunity to do this in the upcoming federal budget. The truth is, Mr Deputy Speaker, despite recent media reports, this dire situation will not be significantly addressed by yesterday's routine indexation, which saw some payments increase by just 96 cents per day. More than 3.3 million Australians are currently living in poverty. That is more than the populations of South Australia, Tasmania, the ACT and the Northern Territory combined. And sole parent families, women and people with disability are all experiencing poverty at above average levels. The system that should be helping these people get through tough times and support them to find suitable employment is broken. Surely, as a parliament, we should be able to agree that the income support payments should be enough to cover the basics: food, rent, energy, medicines, so that people can focus on getting on with their lives, be that as parents or as an employee once they find their job. For young Australians, this payment should be enough for them to study and find employment without worrying about where their next meal will come from or how they're going to pay the rent. But these payments remain totally inadequate to cover the essentials. The Australian Council of Social Services' latest survey of people receiving job seeker payments, youth allowance, parenting payment, AusStudy, AbStudy or a special benefit found that 9 in 10 people renting privately are in rental stress, which means they're paying more than 30% of their income on rent. 7 in 10 are eating less or skipping meals. 7 in 10 are cutting back on heating or cooling for their homes. 3 out of 5 experience difficulty affording their medicines or medical care, and 98% said that the low rate of income support harmed their mental health, while 93% said it harmed their physical health. Mr Deputy Speaker, this is an appalling situation, and we in this place should be ashamed. Every day this parliament fails to increase welfare payments is another day that people on welfare struggle to keep a roof over their head, skip a meal or suffer mental and physical distress. Many people with courage have shared their personal experiences of living on income support with me, and I want to thank them for doing so. I now want to share some of these stories with you so this place can hear the experience of those living on income support in their own words. One person receiving job seeker said that after several years off work to care for my parents, I've not been able to return to the workforce. I have been actively applying for employment since 2017 and have literally applied for hundreds of jobs and have not been successful. Meanwhile, the gap in my employment record has widened and employers are now discriminating against me for it. I am now 59 years of age, single, with no super, and due to the ongoing financial stress, I suffer from mental health issues along with physical health issues, the result of years of unemployment, stress and poverty. I don't have family nor friends to lean on for support and I'm quite isolated and alone. Separately, someone on our study actually said they're staring down the road of homelessness with each lease renewal or rent hike, while another receiving job seeker said relying on income support makes you depressed, anxious and gives you panic attacks. It adversely affects your overall physical health and confidence. You feel less of a person. You feel like you don't belong, like an outcast. Mr Deputy Speaker, hearing these stories is truly heartbreaking, and I believe it is our job, the job of the people in this place, to say you do belong. But more than that, this parliament, this government has a very real opportunity to show the more than 1 million people relying on these payments that they belong by significantly increasing income support payments in the upcoming budget. Routine indexation, while better than nothing, simply doesn't cut it. This week, job seeker payments increased due to indexation by just 96 cents. That isn't even enough to buy you the reusable shopping bag, let alone the groceries to put in it. 96 cents a day, Mr Deputy Speaker. It won't help with the rent, it won't make a dent in the energy bills, and it certainly won't buy you a bottle of water, let alone a meal. And for this reason, I think the government's media release announcing this indexation, titled as "Indexation puts more in the pockets of millions of Australians," and boasting it boosted payments, is insulting to the more than 1 million Australians struggling to live on these inadequate support payments. People are systematically being left behind. Young people who are trying to kickstart their working life are being left behind, with students struggling to pay for essentials while trying to complete their degrees. In fact, those on youth allowance experience the deepest poverty. Women are being left behind, particularly single mothers and older women. People with a disability are being left behind, and the situation is worsened by a cost of living crisis that is not easing. Inflation may have slowed, but that doesn't mean costs are coming down. They are merely rising less quickly than previous months. And many of the costs that rose faster than inflation were for essential goods and services, things that households cannot avoid spending on even when the prices increase faster than the wages. Over the 12 months to December 2023 quarter, Mr Deputy Speaker, CPI rose 4.1%, so that's indexation. But food and non-alcoholic beverages rose 4.5%. Housing costs rose 6.1%. Electricity rose 6.9% and health costs rose by 8%. In that scenario, regular indexation can be clearly seen to be inadequate. An urgent boost to welfare payments is needed. The OECD has recommended Australia lift unemployment payments, highlighting that they remain amongst the lowest in the OECD and are well below the poverty line. Last year, the Economic Inclusion Advisory Committee report found that job seeker payments were inadequate against all benchmarks and recommended substantially increasing payment, potentially to 90% of the value of the aged pension as the most effective way to tackle poverty. Today, the Australian Council of Social Services has called for social security payments to be increased to 100% of the aged pension. But it should be noted, Mr Deputy Speaker, that the aged pension itself does not provide a comfortable standard of living, and I'm frequently contacted by members of my community sharing with me their struggles trying to get by on the aged pension. It's just not good enough. So while increasing all social service payments to the same rate as the aged pension might be a starting point, and it will lift millions out of poverty, it's by no means the entire solution. I acknowledge the government did increase payments in the May budget last year, but it did so by only $20 a week. That's $4 a working day. It's not a coffee. It's well below the increase called for by the Economic Inclusion Advisory Committee, the Australian Council of Social Services, and those with lived experience, and many, many others. Ultimately, this piecemeal approach to small increases and routine indexation is not addressing this national crisis with anywhere near the urgency that we should adopt as a parliament. The upcoming May budget provides us with an opportunity to fix this, and so while we may continue to debate what income we should be generating as a government through reforms like an adjustment of the PRRT or changes in individual tax circumstances, ultimately it's beyond belief that in a country as wealthy as Australia, those 3.3 million people continue to live in poverty. I call on this government, I call on this parliament to urgently act and end poverty in Australia. We can do this by beginning with delivering a substantial increase to income support payments in the upcoming budget. Thank you, Deputy.